Hi, I'm Chris.rao, Vice President of Clinical Development at Alira Health. I think the biggest thing right now is that there is still a lot of uncertainty, both with industry and also with the hospitals and the centers that are running trials themselves for industry. So I think one of the most difficult things right now is not understanding what the timeline is with COVID-19, what's going to happen, and how that might affect ongoing and planned clinical trials. So there's a number of disruptions right now. The primary disruption is the patients. So obviously with the crisis taking resources from different hospitals and centers, we're finding that some sites are shutting down new enrollment to clinical trials. Other sites are having to manage now an increased workload with COVID-19 patients while also trying to enroll to their existing trials. And at the same time, on the industry side, sponsors of clinical trials are finding that they may have issues with funding. They're having issues with now their entire workforce no longer being in the office and working from home. And even for smaller companies where they're already virtual, there's additional challenges with now trying to run complex clinical trials and also having to manage a completely different dynamic with your workforce and with the sites that are participating in your trials. So we're seeing a lot of uncertainty, a lot of disruption right now, and things are still playing out minute by minute. We saw that FDA released guidance recently, both on the device and the pharma side, in terms of how sponsors can manage clinical trials that are ongoing. So FDA is trying to assist in releasing this guidance, and we're finding that really it's a day-by-day assessment of each trial as a unique entity. Obviously, the primary goal of FDA is always patient safety, and that's also the primary goal of researchers and sponsor companies that are running trials. So in the guidance FDA recently released for sponsors and for industry, obviously the primary concern is patient safety. So for a lot of our clients, and what we're hearing is really we're advising two main things. That's patients, but also that our clients are being proactive in terms of analyzing how they can modify their existing trials to take into account the changing dynamic in terms of COVID-19, but also to ensure both patient safety, but also still the efficacy of the end result of their clinical trial. So there's lots of different ways that we're advising that our clients do that. I mean, we're looking at lots of different models. Some companies are looking to telehealth, to remote visits. We're also doing a lot of work in terms of home visits. So can we modify our existing trial and take some patients out of the clinic and perhaps run those assessments, maybe those lab draws or those physical exams? Can we do those at home on a one-to-one basis with a private nurse versus having to have them travel into a hospital and potentially be exposed to other patients with COVID-19? So it's really being proactive. And even for clients where perhaps you're thinking about running a trial, you haven't started it yet, there's a lot that we can still do in terms of that setup process. It's really about understanding what our participating centers are willing to do. So some hospitals have decided that they're going to open no new clinical trials. They're not even going to look at potential trials. Other centers are still willing to evaluate potential trials, still willing to talk about the startup process. So it's really on a case-by-case basis, analyzing every aspect of your trial and seeing what can be changed and what has to stay the same. And then planning accordingly, understanding your timeline, understanding how that affects your budget and your staffing. And it's really, again, I think what everyone's doing right now is taking things day by day, looking at risk mitigation and trying to understand what the best path is forward. Yeah, I think my best advice would be don't panic, which is difficult in a scenario like this. There's lots of ways to modify your current plans to be able to navigate in this situation, but at the same time, be realistic. For companies where you're reporting to a board of directors or shareholders, be realistic and understanding that your timelines are going to have to change. So even in an ideal scenario where you're able to modify your trial, you're able to perhaps move forward with having FDA review, you will still have some substantial delays or substantial modifications to your overall timeline and study plan. So be realistic about that, but also be proactive. We talked a little bit about things that we can do to perhaps modify our trial designs, modify our patient populations. If those are possibilities, explore them. If you don't feel you have the expertise in-house, work with a partner company who's experienced with home visits, with telehealth, with creative adaptive protocol designs.